So, welcome to this lab wherein we will study how we perform FBA using MATLAB. We will first look at linprog, which is the standard MATLAB linear programming optimizer, and see how we can assemble the arguments for linprog from the various components of the FBA that you already know, which is basically maximize C transpose V such that SV equal to 0 and some bounds and so on. And we will also look at what is the model structure for any COBRA model. So, COBRA stands for constraint based reconstruction analysis. It is a very popular toolbox known as Open COBRA toolbox, and we will also see how we can perform FBA using the COBRA toolbox. So, today we will have a lab session. We will look at how to simulate simple constraint based models without using any toolboxes. We will then move over to using the most popular COBRA toolbox for making FBA simulations and so on. So, let us see how do you simulate such models just using MATLAB, because it is just a simple linear program. So, the first thing to look at is how do we use linear programming or the function linprog in MATLAB. So, to recap, what is a linear program? Minimize or maximize f transpose x such that Ax equals b. This is what we would call an equality constraint. You can also have inequality constraints. F is the objective function. So, here f is the objective function, A is your matrix, and this is basically your linear system of equalities. Right? You can also actually have some inequality constraints. Whereas in FBA we only have a single objective function and equality constraints. Do we have inequality constraints?
If you know the range of,
you know the lower bound and upper bounds. So, those can actually be specified as inequality constraints, but these are very simple constraints. These are just upper and lower bounds. So, they are usually specified separately. So, most solvers will have a specification for upper and lower bounds. You have a variable x that you want to find, and you can basically give alpha I less than equals xi. This is possible.
if the solver takes the upper and lower bound is not as a constraint, does the method of solving change?
I didn't catch that.
If the solver takes it as upper and lower bounds instead of as a constraint,
It is the same thing, no?
it's the same thing.
It is the same thing. It just says this is the constraint. This is the linear constraint that is given to the solver in terms of upper and lower bounds. Because see, if you had a constraint x1 plus x5 greater than equal to 10, then you need to specify it differently. If all you are saying is x1 greater than equal to 5, x2 less than equal to 10, you can directly specify them as upper and lower bounds. It doesn't affect how the solver works. So, now let us just, this is the, as what I called yesterday, the canonical FBA form. What are all the variables in our case? What is f? C. C. What is x? X is V. What is A? Stoichiometric matrix. What is B? Zeros. 0 m cross 1. And LB UB. Is that clear? These are all our variables that we need to worry about. So, now let us go back to linprog. So, linprog has multiple ways of calling it. So, the basic thing, first thing you need to notice, it is a minimize f transpose x, not maximize. So, you will have to instruct it to maximize differently, or you just say minus f, right. Minimize of minus f is same as maximize of f, subject to Ax less than equal to b. So, you can call it in several ways. The first one is linprog FAB, right. We do not have this kind of a inequality constraint, so let us ignore that. Then we have linprog FAB A equality B equality, that sounds better. Even better for us is x equals linprog of FAB A equality B equality LB UB. So, this defines a set of lower and upper bounds on the design variables x, so that the solution is in the range LB less than equal to x less than equal to UB. Perfect. This is in perfect tune with the constraints we saw here yesterday.
So LB and UB either should be a dimension of x or should be 1 cross 1.
It is dimension of x,
If
or you know, for or single variables. That's what it is.
So you can only give one equality and one inequality.
No.
No,
Give the dimension of
in like A, B, A, Q, B, Q, you can only give one equality A, Q, B, Q and one inequality. You can't give multiple.
It's a matrix, no? A is a matrix, so it's all your inequality constraints are clubbed into the A matrix. All your equality constraints are clubbed into the A matrix. So this looks good. So you know what is F? What is F?
C.
C. A?
Yes.
No. A is empty. No inequality constraints. B? Empty. A eq?
Yes.
S. B eq? Zeros. L B U B, you know. We don't even need to give an x naught. So can you set up this problem now?
So A, B which are not which is empty, you will put as none or
Empty. So A and B do not exist, so we will just put empties in their space. So I would essentially call it as x comma fval comma exit flag is linprog of minus c, because I want to maximize empty s zeros lb ub, right, function value. So let us once again look at the help. What are the output variables? The output variables are x, okay, where are they? Here, x, fval and exit flag. Very important thing you need to note is the exit flag. You need to check the value of exit flag before you make any decisions on what's to use the optimized value or not, right, because an optimization is essentially a search. What is the guarantee that the search successfully terminated, right? There is a possibility. So if you try to optimize the system, x plus y equals 5 and x plus y less than 0 as a constraint, it's not going to work, right. So it would say that the no feasible point is found, right, or occasionally it can reach the maximum number of iterations and so on and so forth, right. So you need to check if your status is 1. So let us assemble the problem now, and fval is the value of the function. So as a reminder, which of these is unique? Fval is unique. You may get different x's using different algorithms, right, different solvers, right.
One solver only.
Invariable, because most of the algorithms used for LP are deterministic. What we discussed in the previous class was that there are several optima that are equivalent optima that are possible. Equivalent in the sense C transpose x is the same, x will be different. So what is S? You can just type this out. So, that looks correct. We now have the S matrix in the memory. What is C? 0 0 0 1 0 0 0. LB equals this, UB equals this. Now I can say XFL exit flag equals linprog minus C S zeros 5 comma 1, 5 zeros 5 metabolites LB UB. So, importantly it says optimal solution has been found. There are other solvers. So, there are commercial solvers. Thankfully, many of them are free for academics. So, there are solvers like Gurobi and so on. We will be using them when we look at harder models. Right? Like larger models, I think linprog might be too slow. Although linprog seems to have improved a lot since even the previous version of MATLAB, I think. So, what is the value of x you expect? So, what is the value of FVal you expect? FVal is the value of B2, right. So, what is the value of B2 you expect? Ten. Right. But you might have a very sparse solution where all these are 0, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0, this is 0 and this is 10, 10 and 10. Let us see what the solution looks like. So, FVal is minus 10 because we negated the C function. Exit flag is 1 because it anyways said optimization optimal solution was found, and x is this. You see it is quite sparse, it is 0 minus 10, 0 10 10 0 0. So, it is 0 for V1 minus 10 for V2, meaning it goes in this direction C to B, and 0 for B1, 10 for B2, 10 for B3 and 0 0 for the others. So, it is basically saying 0 0 0 0 10 10 10.
So it just made a maximum value for something. And
Yeah. So, it made a very sparse solution. This is similar to what we was talking in the previous class, right. If you made the solution that you have as sparse as possible, right. Suppose you wanted x plus y equal to 10 and at the same time minimizing the number of non-zero elements in that vector. So, you would get an answer of 0 10 or 10 0.
How would you include these constraints in the linear programming solver?
Which constraints?
V less than 10, greater than 0, all of that. The additional.
So these are the LBs and UBs, I did include them.
Oh, okay. Apart from lower bounds and upper bounds, what if you want to include constraints? So, for example, like here, one solution was all 4.73, 4.73, one was just 0, 0, 0, 10. What if you want everything to be in the range of 3 to 5? Okay, what if you want an additional inequality like V1 plus V2 lesser than 10?
So that goes into A
So what if
inequality.
you want multiple such inequalities?
Put them into a matrix, right?
What's the matrix form like?
Why is that a little confusing? So tell me your equations.
Say V1 plus V2 lesser than 5. V1 plus V3 less greater than 10.
Right. So first thing is, let's make let's look at the MATLAB help. I think the constraints are in one direction only. Ax less than equal to b. So the greater than constraint, you change it, you make it minus x1 minus x3 less than minus 10. Right. So now these two you can stick them into a matrix. Right. You can say 1 0 sorry 1 1 0 minus 1 0 minus 1 into x1 x2 x3 less than equal to 5 minus 10 a x b, not so. In fact, can you tell me how do you convert this into an inequality constraint? It's an equality constraint. How do you convert it into an inequality constraint? So you say SV greater than equal to 0 and
So, but now instead of giving only 0, it can give values which are less be greater than 0 also, right? So we are losing, we are getting additional solutions.
because
Greater than or equal to 0, so it can give 0 or 1 to something.
it can't, right? Because I'm saying it's also less than equal to 0. But you're unnecessarily amplifying the problem. Okay. But it's good to know this because occasionally you may need to do this to debug something. So have you done this? Have you solved the linear program? Set it up. No, you have to download them separately.
The COBRA toolbox, you told what solvers it has.
It supports many solvers. It doesn't have any solver. No, our toolbox will come in with a solver, but it supports many solvers. It has interfaces for several solvers. Can you download this file? Labs COBRA E. coli underscore model.mat. And also this installing COBRA toolbox. You can follow these instructions and install the COBRA toolbox. So we'll have a formal model to the COBRA toolbox in the next lab. But for now, let's look at how a COBRA based model looks like. COBRA stands for Constraint Based Reconstruction and Analysis Toolbox, COBRA toolbox. So how does the model look like? So the model is a MATLAB structure with several fields. You can make sense of most of them, I would say. So RxNS stands for reaction IDs, METs stand for metabolite names or IDs, metabolite IDs essentially, or the internal naming of the metabolite. S is your stoichiometric matrix. So obviously that's going to be M cross R, so it's 72 cross 95. Rev, as you might guess, is a vector that talks to you about whether a reaction is reversible or not. It's a Boolean vector. LB, UB are lower bound and upper bounds. C is your objective function. Rules tell you something about what genes are involved with what reactions and so on. Then genes is a list of genes. Reaction gene matrix tells you what genes are incident on what reactions. Gene regulation, let us skip some of these, they are not so important. Reaction names tell you what are the names of the reactions, something like exchange of glucose and so on. Met names are the metabolite names, you know that therefore that GLC is glucose and things like that. Met formulas are the chemical formulae of the metabolites. B is nothing but your 0 vector, right, M cross 1 0 vector, and this is the description. This is a simplified E. coli core model. So several reactions are lumped together. The actual E. coli model has something like 1260 genes and so on. This is a very simplified reaction model with just 137 genes involving 95 reactions. So I will use the COBRA toolbox now without actually telling you how to use it, and run it, and let us see if I get a solution. I need to initialize the COBRA toolbox. Yeah. So I now get a solution. Optimized CB model means optimized constraint based model. We will go through all these functions in a later lab. But here what you have is the output. You have an x vector which we understand can be varying, right, you can have multiple optima. You have an f value which should be the same no matter what solver you use. Then these are other factors, let us not worry about them at this point. Then there is a status of the solver, the time it took, and so on. So, can you get the same solution using linprog now? You have model, you can use a combination of things from model as input to linprog. You can just basically say x comma fval comma exit flag equals something something something. So, the solution is simple. What was the formula we used previously? This was the formula we used previously. So, the same idea we use again. We say x comma fval comma exit flag equals linprog of minus model dot c empty empty empty. I think that is fine. It really does not make a difference. So, empty empty, then model dot s, model dot b, model dot lb, model dot ub. We get the same FL of minus 0.8739. So, in here it says clearly set A equals empty and B equals empty if no inequalities exist. I thought there was a way to ask it to maximize, but no big deal, right? You can always say minus C.
And whatever x value we are getting should be put like a minus for before everything.
No, so you will just do minus C into x. So, minus model dot C into x. No, transpose. In fact, you don't need to do the minus any longer. You already did it, right? So, the x value is actually proper. So, let us again try. So, let us compare scatter FBA solution dot x versus our x. So, you have two values that are really off, but yeah, because I think COBRA will try to make the solution sparse and things like that. But anyway, okay, so got this. I think this is important. So, okay, we will stop here for now. So, I hope you got a good overview of how we perform FBA using MATLAB. For simple models, we can use things like linprog, and for more complex models, genome scale models, one tries to use the COBRA toolbox and some commercial optimizers which are most often free for academics such as Gurobi and so on. We also viewed how the COBRA model structure looks like, and we also performed an FBA using the COBRA toolbox itself. In the next video, we will look at perturbations to these metabolic networks. So, we have already studied how you optimize or perform flux balance analysis on a given metabolic network in a particular condition. Now, what happens when you start perturbing this metabolic network by either overexpressing a gene or deleting a genes or deleting multiple genes and so on. So, in the next video, we will start looking at gene deletions, reaction deletions, and the concept of gene protein reaction associations.